The International Journal of Clinical Research strives to promote research and publication and helps medical students and doctors contribute towards the growth of healthcare. It's truly a commendable honor to have Dr. Mace Rothenberg join us for today's webinar. He's a leader and pioneer in the field of healthcare. Please note that the webinar is also being live streamed through the RGCR Central website. My colleague Leonora, a third-year medical student from Lebanon, who's also a member of the Pioneers in Medicine chapter, will be introducing the journal now. Over to you, Leah.
Hello, good morning and good evening, everyone. My name is Leah Nahra. I'm a medical student at the Lebanese University in Lebanon. I'm a member of the Pioneers in Medicine Student Committee, and I am really honored to be presenting the journal, the International Journal of Clinical Research today. So what is exactly IGCR? IGCR is registered as a non-profit organization in Delaware, USA, where it has 0 article processing charges. However, this does not affect our high-quality, open access, peer-reviewed articles and interactive clinical content for the global medical community. The aim of this journal is to establish equity in the publishing field by waiving publication fees, making sure that no authors are financially disadvantaged. Guarantee high-quality publications by employing rigorous editorial, peer, and statistical review process to evaluation manuscripts. Encourage and promote scientific research by involving young researchers and medical students like myself, teaching and guiding them through the process of publishing. Improve patient outcomes by optimizing information delivery, especially from developing countries. Due to its system and the quality of its article, IGCR has obtained indexation from ISSN, DOI, Crossref, Google Scholar, Publins, and DOAG, and it's through the process of obtaining PubMed and Scopus indexations. Despite IGCR being so young, starting in May 2020, where our reach has started from 5 countries and 9 cities, it has achieved an exponential growth, and now it reached 131 countries and 1,607 cities, and this data is by Google Scholar Analytics. We have started the board of advisors, and one of them is the Professor Barakat, who is the Dean of the Undergraduate Studies at the University of Sao Paulo in Brazil, who also happens to be Dr. Gregory Nicholas Mentor, who is the Managing Editor and Executive Officer at IGCR, and he is with us today. Dr. Nicholas, would you like to add something?
Thank you, Leah. Thank you, Peter, Hiba, and especially thank you, Dr. Rothenberg, for being with us today. It's an honor having you here and having you speak today. And I'm glad that our mission and goal of IGCR has been expanding through these 2 years. And every time we do something so that we can have the quality and free research to everybody. So thank you a lot, Leah.
You're welcome, Doctor. I would like to mention that we are looking for esteemed faculties to join us as Board of Advisors and be a part of this family. The editorial board consists of multiple editors from different fields of different specialties. Dr. Shivangi Saha, the Publishing Director, Dr. Ricardo Villela, Assistant Journal Editor, and Dr. Antonio De Sanclos, the Art Director. They focus on obtaining great quality publication as well as guiding our authors. Starting with the webinar series, its main focus is to inspire young minds by showing them the accomplishments and research of great experienced researchers and how they impacted the world. This is directed by Hiba Sati, along with the Assistant Director, Dr. Keval Hakkar, and I am very proud to be a member of the Pioneers in Medicine Committee, along with my colleagues. We have started our first webinar, The Road to a Chemo-Free World, with Dr. Bruce Chasson. Then we had Why Do Young People Get Cancer with Dr. Alex Kansas. Next, Harnessing Heuristics, Optimizing the Physician-Patient Relationship with Dr. Robert Peter Gale. Then we had Precision Oncology, Where We Are Now and Where We Are Heading with Dr. William O. Later we had Using the Immune System to Fight Cancer with Dr. Patrick Hu. And lastly, we had Precision Oncology, Genomics, Immunotherapy, and Beyond with Dr. Razel Kurzuk. And now We are proud to have our 7th webinar and with the one-word renowned physician, scientist, and leader in medical oncology and biopharmaceutical industry, Dr. Mace Rothenberg. We are looking forward to it. We have our podcast, Medicine Beyond Science, by Dr. Jake Muldoon, an optimist, obtained minister and PhD chemist who has a passion for the stories of others. He had 8 podcasts where he interviews medical personnel, patients, researchers, and special guests to highlight their unique stories, personal experience, and contributions to medicine. And we already have 5 episodes on all podcast channels. So tune in and make sure to listen to the great stories behind each person. If you haven't listened to them yet, go and check them out. And one of the biggest divisions is the Medical Student Advisory Board, MSAB, where we have more than 117 medical students and fresh graduates from 30 countries. It is directed by Dr. Nancy Emanuel, along with Dr. Ricardo Villela and others. The team is putting great efforts and contribution to make this journal a global success. The MSAB division is divided into the following 10 chapters, which will be explained briefly. First, we have the Journal Club chapter directed by Dr. Ricardo Villela. The team provides a journal club meeting every 2 weeks, which are exclusive to the members of the MSAB. This chapter teaches students how to read and critically analyze scientific information while giving them the opportunity to develop their presentation skills. The Research Opportunity chapter has given the opportunity to more than 100 students to participate in a research opportunity. We currently have 14 active groups working on writing a scientific article guided by mentors provided by IGCR. The Digital Health chapter is responsible for teaching and spreading awareness about digital health, an essential and growing field that each physician must know about. The Pioneers in Medicine Student Committee will help in organizing the webinars we discussed. The Growth and Development chapter, which offers every student and every month one session of community building activities and a workshop on growth and development. The Social Media chapter is responsible for the image of the journal social media. It teaches students how to manage a professional account and build teamwork and leadership skills. Hands-on writing skills in collaboration with IGCR Intersect provide students with a hand-on writing experience through which students develop their writing skills directly with a mentor. The International Students Outreach chapter gets external collaborators and educational services that IGCR offers for free for association internationally. The Junior Mentors Program, which is a research course developed specially for the members of the MSAB to guide them from beginners to advanced levels. Lastly, the USMLE Study Group, which is a newly launched chapter to guide, assist, and teach and motivate students who will be taking the USMLE exams to apply for the match in the USA. As you can see, the MSAB offers all these amazing opportunities and much more. If you are interested in joining us, follow us on social media and stay tuned. The applications will open soon. Thank you.
Thank you for your introduction, Leah. We've spent immense hours getting carried away by Dr. Rothenberg's biography. The incessant list of accomplishments always sparks a new interest. I'm sure by the end of today's session, the same spark will instill in you. Now, the director of Pioneers in Medicine chapter, Ms. Hiba Sati, will go on to introduce the speaker.
Thank you so much, Peter. In IGCR, we believe in the free and equitable distribution of knowledge. We also firmly believe that the youth is our future, and it is directly intertwined with research innovations. Therefore, we launched Pioneers in Medicine, an initiative that is 1 year old, where we bring to you medicine's most prominent luminaries discussing their medical journey, research discoveries, and passions in hope that it will inspire you. However, our success cannot be achieved without a great team. And I am fortunate to have a passionate, hardworking, and dedicated team to make this event a reality. Today, we are very excited to host one of the most prominent physicians, researchers, and drug developers, Dr. Mace Rothenberg. Dr. Rothenberg brings more than 30 years of experience in medical oncology, academic research, and biopharmaceutical industry. During his time at Pfizer, he served as the head of clinical development and medical affairs from 2008 to 2018, and then as the chief medical officer of Pfizer from 2019 to 2021. During this time, the company has developed and obtained regulatory approvals for 11 new cancer medicines. They also initiated, completed, and obtained the emergency use authorization for the COVID-19 vaccine. Besides, Dr. Rothenberg continues until now to act as a special advisor for Pfizer. Furthermore, he serves on various editorial boards of several leading medical journals. Dr. Rothenberg is greatly involved in current research and has published more than 100 articles and book chapters, primarily in the areas of early-stage drug development, gastrointestinal malignancies, and ovarian cancer. Being an experienced physician executive, he has received a significant number of awards. He is the recipient of the first Craig Saxton Lifetime Achievement Award from Pfizer for his success in cancer development, the Lane W. Adams Quality of Life Award from the American Cancer Society, and the Statesman Award from the American Society of Clinical Oncology, amongst many others. This makes up to be a short excerpt from a very profound book. I could take up the entire session with his merits and various attainments. However, I'd reckon you'd rather hear it best from the man of the hour. Without further ado, Dr. Mace Rothenberg, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Heba, and thanks to all of you who've helped put together this wonderful organization. I have to admit that I wasn't very familiar with IJCR before Jan Leifman and Heba and others reached out to me to give this talk today. But listening to the incredibly strong breadth of work that you're doing, and this is a grassroots effort to provide medical students and early career physicians and physician scientists the tools they need to be successful. I'm not aware of any organization like this in the world, and really want to acknowledge and thank all of you for taking the time out of your busy schedules, becoming physicians, becoming researchers, to actually help others around the world. What you're doing is incredibly important, and I just want to thank you for your efforts. So today, I may be giving a bit of a different kind of talk than the others that you've heard. In situations like this, it's very tempting to talk about one's research and achievements, publications, discoveries, and really focus on the what of what their career has been. Today, I'd like to give you a different dimension on this, different insight, and talk to you about the how and the why. Because thinking back to when I was in your shoes, and I graduated from medical school 40 years ago, it was very mysterious to me how all the instructors in my medical school, all the famous researchers got to where they were. It just seemed like they were just so far ahead of us in thinking and knowledge and insight. And for a young medical student like I was, it was completely mysterious about how I would get from where I was to where they were. And in fact, I thought that was basically impossible, that they were just so far beyond me in skill and knowledge and intelligence. Now, looking back over those 40 years, I wish someone had been able to sit down with me and say, it's not a mystery. There are certain approaches, there are certain self-awareness, there are certain qualities that really are common and are very important in one's career. Whether you end up going into research or academia or practice or teaching, all these things, all these qualities, all these skills are very important. And what I would like to do today is to share that with you, to share my reflections on maybe the 8 different qualities or characteristics that have been so important to me in my career and my decisions. So let me start with one that's kind of unexpected, and that is acknowledging that early in my career, there is a tremendous amount of uncertainty and a lack of confidence. I was somewhat intimidated by individuals who, whether we were talking about in college or medical school, residency, or fellowship. Every step along the way, I would encounter individuals who knew exactly what they wanted to do, where they wanted to do it, and who they wanted to work with. And I thought, boy, I'm really far behind. I have no idea of what it is I want to do, much less where I want to do it and who I want to work with. And I thought, these people are light years ahead of me. I'm already far behind. And it turned out that now, in retrospect, that was not necessarily a good thing, because these individuals had been influenced by people who had been successful over the preceding 5, 10, 20 years, and were gravitating to those successful fields. And in some cases, put blinders on, that this was what they were going to do and nothing else. Nothing was going to distract them or divert them from that goal. I realized that I began to understand that sometimes people who had that were limiting themselves. They wouldn't listen to or recognize opportunities that presented themselves. And in fact, medicine is a constantly changing field. And those areas that were really impactful, really important 5, 10, or 20 years ago are unlikely to be the most challenging, exciting fields going forward. But they weren't open to that. And that's a very important point. The other thing is, as unconfident and uncertain as I was, there were some people, my instructors and people who I had a privilege to work with, saw something in me. Sometimes it was something I didn't even see in myself, that they would mention to me, or they would give me an opportunity that surprised me, because I didn't feel that I had that skill. And so recognize that the people who you work with, who have decades of experience, will recognize when someone comes along who has certain skills and strengths, and having somebody point that out to you is really important. So pay attention when someone says, you're extremely good at taking information and putting it together in a novel and insightful way, or you're particularly good at your interaction with patients or doing a procedure. Really take that to heart, because they see something in you. The second element is recognizing your strengths and addressing your weaknesses. Again, every step along the way of my career, it's been easy to find somebody who was smarter than I was, who was more skilled in this area, who had more experience than I did. And I thought, I'm just middle of the pack, if that. And that's all true. But also there are certain things that you have that you're good at, and recognizing that. To follow up on what I mentioned, when someone senior says, you're particularly good in this area, recognize that. And then recognize the opportunities that present themselves to you that actually build on that, allow you to build on that, because you don't want to stay stagnant. You don't want to say, I've reached this point, that's the highest I'm ever going to achieve, but to say, okay, I'm good at this, what will make me better at this? And if I'm not good at something else, how can I address that weakness? You may not become expert in that area, but recognize that you do want to become better. And then being able to take that and use that in your job decisions. Is there a job that allows you to build upon your strengths? It's something that you enjoy doing, and that will allow you to take what you do well and really continue to escalate that. It will challenge you. You'll have to work hard, but by taking a job like this, it recognizes your value in this area to others. And that's very important, that what you're doing is recognized and valued, and it allows you to develop those skills. So the third area that was absolutely critical throughout my career, even to this day, is the role of mentorship. Now, in the last few years, this has become very codified. People are assigned mentors. And I don't know if that's necessarily the best thing. It allows everyone to say, yes, I have an official mentor. But what you're really looking for is somebody who takes a particular interest in you as a person and your development. It's not necessarily what you can do for them, because that's transactional. That's not a mentor. That's somebody who's a boss. And sometimes bosses can be mentors as well. But you want to find somebody who recognizes your skills and abilities and is going to point out different things about you, about your potential that you may not even see, and open doors for you. Kind of point them out where they are. Sometimes you may not even know they exist. You may not know this opportunity or this job or this kind of skill set is necessary and useful in this setting. They'll point it out to you. They'll open the door, but it's up to you to walk through the door. So looking back, I realized that at times in my career where I've had mentors, I've flourished. And in those times in my career, in my education, where I haven't had somebody who really helped me identify where I could take my talents and where I could go with them, I didn't do as well. And fortunately, in the last 20 or 30 years, I've consistently had mentors, again, even to this day. And in fact, it's now, even though you are early in your careers, it's never too early for you to also feel your responsibility to mentor others. So you may be a house officer, you may be a fellow, you may be a medical student, but you know, there's somebody 2 or 3 or 5 years younger than you are who's looking at you and saying, how did they get there? How did they do this? Can I do this too? So look for those opportunities, and if they come available, take advantage of them. Even though you feel like I'm so early on, I don't know what I'm doing, much less how I can mentor someone else. You know far more than you think you do, and that you really can help others who are really trying to pursue a similar path. A fourth element has gotten a lot of attention over the years, and that's the need and a willingness to work hard. Now, that's necessary for a successful career, but it's not sufficient. There are people who work very, very hard, but never get beyond where they are or never seem to be able to advance in their careers. It's very frustrating for them, but actually it's more than just working hard, but it is an important element. And it really comes in several forms. It's recognizing how you can contribute in various situations. So for instance, I remember as a medical student, there was a code blue, a cardiac arrest, and I was stepping back because I had the least knowledge of what to do in the situation. But I looked and I saw that people were asking about what the blood gas showed or what the blood work showed, and no one was drawing the blood. So I was able to step in and contribute by drawing the blood, not because someone asked me, because I recognized it needed to be done. And that willingness to work hard and contribute to a larger group where your contribution may not even be recognized is still important. But at the same time, that need to step up at times and lead an effort. And those of you who spoke just before, all of you have stepped up tremendously to recognize that there was a gap, no one else was filling it, and you did, and you've created something that is just a worldwide resource and really to be commended. So recognizing when you're able to contribute, when you're asked to lead, and being able to contribute in both those ways, because another mistake that people make is saying, well, if I can't lead this effort, I'm not going to even contribute to it because I'm at a point in my career where I am only leading things, not just working and contributing. That's a mistake. Recognize that there's always going to be a balance there, and those things are going to be very important and worthwhile. Recognize that sometimes during your careers, you're going to be asked to step up and work harder than you want to, than you think is possible, but that those who are asking you to do that recognize it's absolutely essential. To be able to step up and you discover something about yourselves. You know, in our medical training, we're all on call periodically. It was 40 years ago, much more common for us to be on call more frequently and not to have limitations on our work hours. And you know, there were times when I thought I couldn't stay up 36 or 40 straight hours, and I did, and it allows you to grow. It's not an easy experience, but also recognize that those periods where you are working harder than you really feel comfortable doing, or you don't think it's possible, it's not going to last forever. You're not going to be working at that same level forever. And these things continue on throughout your career. In a career in academia and research, when you are working against a deadline for a grant, you are going to be working long hours to try and get that grant in the best shape possible before that deadline. When you're preparing to give a talk, you're going to work harder. But recognize that there are also going to be periods of time where you can step back from that, where you are allowed to rest and recuperate. So as long as you recognize that, and the people around you recognize that you may be less available to them during this period of time, and they shouldn't expect you to be around all that much for that time, then that works out just well. So the fifth opportunity is, or the fifth point, is to be open to unexpected opportunities. And I talked earlier about those people who had blinders on and only focused in one area. Virtually every one of my jobs came as a result of a telephone call or an unexpected conversation I had at a meeting. And these were positions that I didn't know about, opportunities that I wouldn't have considered, but because I was there and I was open to these conversations, they occurred. And one of the things that struck me in looking back on my career is that every time I changed jobs, I look back and I realized that in my previous role, I had begun to plateau, that I was good at doing what I was doing. I was doing it well and it was successful, but that I really wasn't being challenged. And sometimes, and you probably know people like this, that's fine with them. They've worked hard during a certain part of their career, and now they want to be able to benefit from that for the rest of their career, and they do what they do, and they do it well, and they'll do it until they retire. There are others who feel like, okay, I've gotten to this point, and now suddenly is an opportunity for me to take these skills and abilities that I have, what I'm good at, and actually take that to the next level. I will have to work hard. It may be uncomfortable because I'm being asked to do more and take on more responsibility. But as a result, I'll be able to contribute at a higher level and have a bigger impact. And am I ready for that? Is this the right job, the right opportunity? And so I think that's what's happened. Just to give you one specific example, from 1998 until 2008, I was a professor of medicine and cancer research at Vanderbilt in Nashville, Tennessee. And I was very happy. My research was going well. My grants were being funded. And I easily envisioned myself working in that setting until I retired. I was in my early 50s towards the end of that time. But there were people who were in the institution who were in their 60s and 70s, some into their 80s, who were still vibrant and productive. And I thought, that's not a bad career to have. And then one day I got a phone call. And I had received similar phone calls in the past from various pharmaceutical companies about whether I might be interested. And I would listen and politely, and then say, this may not be the right opportunity for me, but let me give you the names of other people who may be interested in something like this. So I was polite and listened, but also told them it wasn't for me. But then, so I got a call, and immediately when this person started talking, I began thinking about the names of other people to give them. But the more they talked, the more I realized that this was a position unlike any I had ever heard of before. This was going to be in a company that was not known as being very big in the cancer drug development world. Pfizer was more of a primary care company, but they were reorganizing into business units, and one of the business units was going to be focused in oncology. I thought, that's interesting. That they had brought in somebody from the outside to lead this organization. And it turns out that I knew that person from earlier in my career when I was working on the development of a drug called gemcitabine, a drug that's useful in pancreas cancer. And in those interactions in developing that drug, I got to know him, and I respected him. He was very smart, very capable, understood medicine, understood science, and how to get drugs developed. And now he was leading this organization. And then the last thing that made me think that this was a different kind of opportunity was the role was the head of clinical development and medical affairs. And in many companies, those roles are separate, but here they were combining that. And I always viewed that as a continuum rather than separate domains. So at the end of that discussion, rather than saying thanks, but here are the names of other people you may want to call, I said, well, why don't you send me the job description? And they did. And as I'm reading that and looking at what the kind of experience they're looking for, kind of skills they're looking for, I thought, this is like written for me. So I said, okay, I'll call up this fellow and talk to him a little bit about it. And he said, come on up to New York and we'll talk about the role. And I did. And I realized, really to my surprise, that this role would build upon what I had done in my whole career in academia and allow me to have an impact at a higher level, to actually be able to help develop the strategy and implement that strategy to bring new drugs to treat people with cancer. And I thought, you know, there are lots of people in academia doing what I was doing at that time, early phase clinical development, translational research, but there were just a few people who had the responsibility of being able to manage a portfolio, prioritize opportunities, recognize when there was a drug that was working, and accelerate their development. And I thought about it. I thought, you know, if I allow myself, I could be very excited about this opportunity. But I also had to think about this and realize that it was going to be a real change for me, because I was used to being the professor giving lectures, being invited to institutions to talk about my research, chair sessions at the national and international meetings, seeing and treating patients and training others. And I had to really think long and hard about that, about what the trade-off would be, because there is a trade-off when you take on new responsibilities. What are you being asked to do that you'll have to focus on to be successful? And those things that you're going to have to rely on others to do. And when I stepped back, I thought, you know, if I had been successful during my career in academia, I have trained many people who can continue doing what I was doing in academia, and they'll do it as well, if not better than I could. And that would take this field forward. So I made the decision, and I realized there was going to be a lot of people who were surprised at my leaving academia, disappointed. And I had to get used to that, but I also realized this was the right decision for me. So that's another important point, is that you know yourself best. Don't be influenced by how others will react to it. Is this going to disappoint a mentor or a friend or a teacher? It's not for them. You're doing this for yourself. And when you're making these kinds of decisions, it shouldn't be a close call. It should be that all the indicators point in the direction that this is the right decision for you. It should be the right job, the right time, working with the right people, and you'll have the right responsibilities that allow you to grow and develop. So these are some things that I've thought of with each of the big decisions in my life, not only professional, but personal decisions as well, and it served me well. Sixth point is no experience is wasted. No interaction is wasted time. One of the things that really surprises me now is how often paths cross with someone who I interacted with years ago. Sometimes those interactions were fleeting. We met in a particular meeting, we worked on a paper or a protocol or a clinical trial together. And I was just even surprised that they remembered who I was. But it was the quality of that interaction, the fact that I was able to contribute, the fact that I was respectful and contributing to the success of that project isn't lost on people. Even though you may be one of dozens of people working on a project, if you bring your whole self and really dedicate yourself to making the project successful, regardless of whether you're going to lead the project or get the credit that others might get, people will recognize what you did, and it'll come back in very unexpected ways later on in your career. So no experience is wasted time. One of the other, I guess, corollaries of this is that learn from mistakes. When people make a mistake, and we all make mistakes in our lives, in our careers, in our decisions, we all do. It's the key is to recognize that it was a mistake, to be able to rectify that mistake, to learn from the mistakes that you make, and most importantly, learn from mistakes that others make. So recognize, just be aware of that, and recognize that there are a few mistakes that are just irrevocable. Early in your career, they may seem so. I remember feeling like if this experiment didn't work out, if this clinical trial wasn't a success, what's going to happen to my career? Everyone else is succeeding and I'll be the failure. But it's because you don't have that perspective of many years where it ends up everyone makes some mistakes along the way, that you can recover from that. And sometimes the insights that you get from those failed experiments or clinical trials or those mistakes are the ones that force you to look at or approach a situation in a different way. And because of that, you now have greater success than you ever would have before. So keep that in mind. Two last ones. One is judgment and trusting yourself. I think I touched on that earlier in terms of recognizing that others may not be in the best position to tell you what's right for you. You will be. And even though they may be older and more experienced, you know what you're good at, what you like doing, and how this will advance that. And then lastly, job decisions. Because all of us in medicine all have to have jobs one way or another. One piece of advice is don't rely on prestige alone. People will say, well, this institution, everyone recognized this. If you're considered to be worthy of getting a job there, then you must be good. But also there's a trade-off there, and that the institutions recognize this. And sometimes they don't support or advance their people as aggressively or as well as other institutions. Keep in mind that it's really the people that you're going to be working with, and that's going to be one of the most important things. Are they the right people, right resources, the right job? And then the most important thing is, are they interested in you as an individual, as opposed to they just have an empty slot that they need filled by someone? Whenever you're making a big decision to take on a new job or responsibility, you want to make sure that they are going to support you, going to give you the responsibilities that you're looking for, but also the resources that you need to be successful, and that they're going to stay with you and support you, and that more than one person knows about this. Because I've seen experience of people displacing themselves, moving great distances to work in an institution for somebody in particular, and then the next month that person leaves. And now no one knows why this person is here. So you want to make sure that if you are recruited somewhere, that more than just the person who's recruiting you knows you and values your skill and supports you in your career development, that others do as well. And if there are some changes, there will still be people around who recognize you, value, and will support you. So with that, I'd like to conclude my comments. I'm really interested in hearing questions that participants may have. Happy to answer them to the best of my ability. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Rothenberg, for sharing the catalyst that sparked your success. Through the different chapters in your life, you portrayed passion and diligence. I speak for everyone here when I reach out with gratitude for sharing with us how to respond when opportunity knocks, for instilling in us a new mentorship idol. Now we have a few questions for you. So some of the questions that we've gotten are, so question number one is, as the former Chief Medical Officer of Pfizer, how do you feel about the reception of the Pfizer COVID vaccine by the humankind, and about its success as the most widely accepted vaccine by multiple countries?
Yeah. That was an incredible experience that I never anticipated when I started my job. Started in that role in January of 2019. I think that this was a real lesson in leadership. One of the things that I saw firsthand was how the CEO of Pfizer, Albert Bourla, recognized that Pfizer was in a unique position to respond to this. It had the worldwide reach, it had the size, the scope, the expertise, and the resources, and the know-how to actually develop a vaccine. And one of the things he did very early on was to say, we're not going to worry about any other company. We're going to step up and meet this challenge. And he said, he laid out a few guidelines at that time, that the development of a COVID-19 vaccine that was safe and effective was going to be done as rapidly as possible without cutting corners on safety. That this was going to be done with unlimited resources from the company, and the resources used to support development of the vaccine was not going to be taken from any other research program. So those would continue on. This would be in addition to that. This was the highest priority in the company, and if you were called or asked to contribute to this particular effort, you were to stop what you were doing and you were going to contribute to this. He created a leadership team within the company that ended up being 40 some odd patients. I was privileged to be among those, that brought people from all across the company and even outside the company to help us understand what the impact of COVID was going to be, not only on the world in general, on the company, on how we did business, and how how we were going to stay ahead of that, how we're going to keep our employees safe while still accelerating the development of the COVID-19 vaccine. That we were recognizing which other medicines were being used from Pfizer to treat this disease. Remember, there was no vaccine until December of 2021. And in fact, I led a committee that reviewed what medicines were considered essential. There were 77 medicines that Pfizer made that were considered essential in the treatment of people who were sick with COVID, and that we were going to focus our manufacturing to make sure that we met the world supply of those medicines, regardless of what revenue came from those, regardless if they were on patent or generic. We were not going to allow there to be a shortage of those essential medicines. So he really set the tone. He really challenged us to do things in ways that we had never been challenged to do before. Instead of working in sequence, which is done to de-risk the next step and to avoid spending money that was going to be wasted, he said what could be done in parallel, simultaneously, so that we can actually move forward as quickly as possible. So this was the front row seat that I had for the development of the COVID-19 vaccine, and to see it actually happen and be successful in a remarkably short period of time, 9 months from the time the first patient received the COVID-19 vaccine in first in human trials to emergency use authorization, is nothing short of spectacular.
Thank you very much, Doctor. So the next question we have here is from Dr. Nancy Emanuel. What would you say was the biggest changing point in your academic life? Did you realize it back then? And also, did your professional career negatively impact your personal life? What advice would you have for us on finding the balance?
Okay, yeah, 2 questions in there. The biggest moment, let me take one from early in my career. I had just finished my first job at the National Cancer Institute, and this was the first job I took outside that at the University of Texas in San Antonio, working with the phase 1 drug development group. I was getting to know the institution. It was in my first few weeks, and I was invited to meet with a group that was coming in from Eli Lilly and Company to talk about a new medicine, and they were going to have the meeting over lunch. Would I like to go? I said, gee, sure. If it's going to be providing lunch, sure, I'll go. So they began talking about a drug I had never heard of before called gemcitabine. And as they were talking, the people around the table who had experience with the drug in phase 1 were saying, yeah, we see these side effects, but we also see these individual people who have some diseases have really impressive responses. And there was one physician who stood up and said, you know, one of my patients was able to go off their pain medicines. Another physician stepped up and said, oh, one of my patients regained their appetite, so much so that they couldn't wait to leave the infusion clinic to go have lunch. And this is pancreas cancer, where these symptoms usually don't abate by themselves. And I was sitting there just listening, but I realized that something I had done at the National Cancer Institute about a year earlier was particularly relevant, because they were thinking about how can they develop this drug. It wasn't necessarily causing the shrinkage of the tumor, but causing significant impact and reduction of symptoms. Well, what I'd worked on when I was at the NCI, it was a collaboration with the US FDA, was trying to figure out, were there ways of measuring benefit of new cancer medicines that didn't rely on overall survival alone, or even progression-free survival or response rate? Could there be other measures of benefit? And one of the points of agreement between the NCI and the FDA was that a drug that could reliably reduce symptoms that were considered severe or debilitating that were a result of the cancer, that reduction in symptoms could also be a basis for drug approval. The problem was, we had written a manuscript that was under review by the Journal of Clinical Oncology. This hadn't been published yet. So I raised my hand in the meeting. I introduced myself, but I brought this forward and I said, this might be relevant. So with the permission of the other co-authors, I sent them a preprint of that article. And to their credit, they reviewed that, they conferred with experts, and they actually incorporated that into the pivotal trials for the development of gemcitabine in pancreatic cancer. So it wasn't just response rate or survival or progression-free survival, but it was something that was termed clinical benefit response that was clearly defined, rigorously applied. And I can tell you that when this came before the FDA Advisory Committee in 1996, that drug would not have made it just on the small impact it had on survival, but it was the combination of having that impact on survival and a significant reduction in tumor-related symptoms that got the drug approved. So I think that was one of the really telling moments early in my career, that if I had something to add, no matter how senior the people were in the meeting, no matter how experienced they were and knowledgeable they were, I still had something to add that was of value. So that's the first part of the question. The second part of the question is balancing work-life. I think it was something that I talked about earlier, recognizing that there were going to be times when I had to work hard, and having a wife and family that understood that. And also that I made the decision early in my career, again, with the agreement of my family, that one morning each weekend, sometimes Saturday morning, sometimes Sunday morning, I was going to go in, so quiet, there were no distractions, and work on something that needed to be done. So typically that I'd be working on a manuscript, working on a protocol, or working on a grant application. You can't do that in between seeing patients or in 15-minute increments. You have to have a block of time, hours, to just be able to synthesize your thoughts, put them down on paper. And so having that kind of agreement with the family, but then also when I was at home, I was available. I remember one experience very vividly. My daughter was about 3 years old, and I was at home in the evening working on a manuscript, and I had a very challenging paragraph to write. I had several concepts, and I was having a really difficult time stringing together the thoughts. And I finally had gotten the right phrasing for it, and she walks into my office just that moment while I'm furiously typing to show me something. She said, "Daddy, can you take a look at this?" And I said, "Stephanie, just wait a second, I'll be right with you." And I'm writing the rest of the paragraph, and she turns around and walks out of the room. And when I finished writing, I look and she's gone. And I realized something important at that moment. I realized that she wasn't infringing upon my work time. My work was infringing upon my time with her and for her. So that really created a change. And from that moment on, whenever my children were awake and I was at home, I was there for them. And if I had to do some work, While I was at home, it would be only after they went to sleep. So I think that those things are very important lessons in terms of work-life balance.
Thank you for that wonderful insight, Doctor. So the next question we have is with regards to research. We have a lot of attendees here that are medical students, and they're always trying to get into research, and it's always a bit overwhelming and confusing getting into research as medical students. The question here is, what advice do you have for them, and how would they go about that?
Yeah, great question. Recognize no matter how much you read, you're not going to know more than the person you're going to be speaking to, the lab chief, and they don't expect that. But what they do expect is if you go to talk to them, that you at least be familiar with what they're doing. So if there's a website where they describe their laboratory's research, read that. If there's a recent paper that they've published, make sure you read that. You may not understand everything, but at least, and that will help you understand, is this something that interests you? You don't want to work in a research setting just for the sake of writing that down on your resume. You want to do it because you find it interesting. You'll be able to bring yourself to that and be able to work and contribute and enjoy the learning process and contributing to that research effort. So when you do have a meeting with a laboratory chief, make sure you're well prepared and acknowledge the fact that you may not have experience, but that you're willing to work hard and you welcome the opportunity to learn. That's what they're looking for, and that's what will open doors for you.
Thank you, Doctor. So to be respectful of everybody's time, we will be discussing one last question. Today, medicine is witnessing the development of fields such as AI. These fields are a lot harder to find mentors in. What advice do you give for those exploring a new field on their own?
Boy, that's a tough question. There will always be new fields of research in science and medicine. And sometimes it may be difficult to find. They may not be present at your institution. But that shouldn't stop you from being able to learn as much as you know, especially today with the internet. You can tap into the knowledge anywhere in the world. And then to be able to reach out if you feel that this and this alone is really what you want to do. Reach out and say, I'm really interested in working with you, maybe for a summer, maybe for a few months, and I'm willing to travel if you have the resources to do that. If not, then you may want to talk to somebody in your institution to see if they have a particular interest in this area, if somebody's just beginning to work on that area and may not be known to others yet. So talk to people, try and network, and find out, do other people, are they aware of this? Do they have access or knowledge? And then something might come up that is the right opportunity for you in the right location.
Perfect. Thank you for that, Doctor. So we have one last question from our Managing Director, Dr. Gregory Nicholas. Dr. Greg, would you like to take it up?
Thank you, Peter. Dr. Rothenberg, I just wanted to actually tell you that it's an amazing and inspirational talk that you gave us, the 10 points. We have approximately more than 300 people participating in our live today from across different countries. The IT people were telling us. And this session was so inspirational of every point, and the way you transmitted those messages were so clear. I just want to tell, I'm pretty sure everybody's thinking the same thing that I'm thinking. It is amazing how every point gets to us. Like we understand that we can relate to it. And one of the things that I wanted to ask you for me, for every student, when we pass through very stressful moments where we have those big decisions to make, people living abroad is going to travel to a different country to do the residency, or people doing in the same country want to stay because of their family. How do you take those big decisions, those stressful decisions that are going to change your whole career? Those seconds that you have to decide on something, whether it's the benefit of you, benefit of your family, the future of the career of your patients. How, I know you explained it part of your 10 points, but I think everybody here, since they're abroad and thinking where should they train, how do you take those decisions? And especially a person who was CMO of one of the biggest companies who took a big role, those stressful events, we need to learn how to cope with those. Yeah. So this is my question. Thank you, Doctor.
Great question. In addition to what I mentioned earlier, one thing that I found incredibly helpful was to talk to somebody who was working in that organization at the time. When I was applying to residency for medical school, I came down to Vanderbilt in Nashville, and on paper it looked really good. And one of the things that was very intimidating was it still had about a third of the year of internship year would be spent every other night on call, which meant if I went into the hospital Monday morning, I wouldn't get out of the hospital till Tuesday afternoon or Tuesday evening. I'd go home and sleep. Wednesday morning, I'd go in. I wouldn't get out of the hospital until Thursday afternoon or Thursday evening. There were no work hour restrictions at that time. It was a very difficult experience. I will not sugarcoat this, and I would not recommend it for anyone right now. But one of the things that I did was when I came to interview, I made sure I spoke to people who were in that very situation. Were they, falling asleep? Were they zombies? Were they crazy? And actually they weren't. They seemed just like they were managing it. And I asked them how they were doing, how they enjoyed it, because there's no substitute for the experience of talking to someone who's gone through an experience that you're about to go through. And this applies not only to work, but also applied to my patients. Having somebody who has gone through or is going through the same shared difficult time makes you realize that, number one, you can do it. Number two, you're not alone. And number three, you can rely on each other and you can support one another. And that's what we did, and that's what I did during those very long work hours that we had. You all know about morning report, where you go over the patients admitted the night or the day before and analyze them and learn from them. We had an informal evening report. It was announced in the same formal fashion over the hospital loudspeakers, but it was very different. It was one of the teams that was on call that night would send the medical students out to bring in snacks. And so no matter how busy you were, you'd just stop by there just to get something to drink or something to nibble on. And it was a way of us supporting one another in a very informal way. You'd complain about how hard your night was. You had 3 admissions and 1 in the intensive care unit. And then the person who was on call with you would say, yeah, I have 4 patients admitted and 2 in the intensive care unit. And you'd look over to them and say, well, they're holding up pretty well. I guess I can too. And in these informal ways, you support one another. So I think that that's one of the things that I could also share in terms of making decisions is you want to make sure that you talk to people who are going through what you're about to, and that they have some advice and insight and support that you can draw on as well.
Thank you, Doctor. Thank you for all of your inspiring work and for paving the way for both aspiring and current healthcare professionals. You've made a phenomenal difference in the atmosphere of healthcare, and with that, we hope to fill in your shoes one day and carry the same torch. Furthermore, thank you for all of the valuable time that you've spent, and to everyone that's joined us today. We had over 312 people that joined us today across all platforms. Thank you all for taking out the time so we can be synonymously present here. I hope you leave this webinar full of inspiration and a new morale. Thank you, everyone. Goodbye.
I'm inspired as well by your work. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you a lot, Doctor.
Thank you.